Mariea Dennison speaking on John's retirement, June 1997. I have had the pleasure of knowing John as a student, a colleague, and a friend. I first met Mr. Myslicki in 1977 when he and his wife Marge first arrived in Knighton. To me and my grade 7 peers, Mr. Myslicki was a sight to see. He did not fit our expectations of what a teacher should look like. He seemed so extraordinarily tall. He had a beard and wore sandals with wool socks. No suit and tie for this man. As different as he was, many of us took a liking to him. He seemed to be so worldly in his ways. We all loved to hear his stories about his travels and his work with the Hutterites. Besides, if you could get him talking, you could forget about the rest of the class. You could put your books away, sit back, and enjoy the story. Mr. Myslicki was not at Knighton long before the students gave him the nickname the Pope. It had nothing to do with religion. It was just that Mr. Myslicki was always so good. He was always smiling, always polite, and always doing the right thing. No matter how hard some of the others tried, they could never get him to lose his cool. We never heard something negative come out of his mouth. To us in junior high, he definitely fell into the category of weird. Now that I'm a mature adult, I see that goodness as a wonderful gift. I understand why the elementary students would rush over and surround Mr. Myslicki every time he stepped out onto the playground. Even the other day, when I went outside to find John, I didn't look for John. I looked for the circle of kids, and there he was. John spent some of his early years at Knighton as the vice principal, as well as teaching elementary and junior high. Although Mr. Myslicki was always doing well, when I think back, I don't think he was particularly suited to being a vice principal. How could he be? He was never in his office. He was always out with the students or helping out a colleague. Paperwork was never a priority. Even in French class, this new teacher would make us speak and listen. No workbooks for us. Can you imagine having to speak French in front of your snickering classmates? But Mr. Myslicki never laughed at us. He constantly encouraged our attempts at a foreign language. During those early years, John and Marg proved to us local folk that they were truly different. You had to be crazy to buy a quarter of muskeg in the bush, with no road or services to it, and think you were going to live there. Through a lot of hard work and determination, John and Marg carved out their little piece of paradise beside the beaver dam. This explains why Mr. Myslicki was in such good shape when he took on coaching the volleyball teams. You walk 3/4 of a mile in rubber boots through the muskeg every day to get to work, and then back again after a long day. John's faithful skidder was his and Marg's lifeline to the outside world. Winter was a much better time. After all, the muskeg would freeze enough that they could drive in and out, unless the snow got too deep. Even I was thankful for John's skidder one winter. It was February of 1982. Mr. Myslicki had encouraged me to participate in a student exchange program, and I was off to spend 3 months in Quebec City. He was to go along as a liaison person for the first week. I was thankful to have someone I knew going with me. The morning we were to leave, we woke up to one of the worst snowstorms ever. I was sure we would never make it to Edmonton in time for me to leave. As deep as the snow was, we managed to get to Knighton, where we were to meet with the Myslickis. But there was no sign of them, and I wasn't too keen on going all the way to Quebec by myself with a group of total strangers. It was getting close to the point where we had to go when Mr. Myslicki arrived. It was only because of the skidder that he made it out. We made it to Quebec City, and after seeing me settled in, John and Marg returned home. To this day, I remember how glad I was to have Mr. Myslicki around those first few days in a strange city so far from home. Thank goodness for that skidder. When I began my teaching career, I was glad to have John around then too, as were many other new teachers who have gone through the doors of Knighton. As a first-year teacher, I experienced all the typical ups and downs. How lucky was I to have John as my next-door neighbor. He provided support, encouragement, praise, and hands-on help during my first year. Just when I thought the whole business of teaching was too much, John would poke his head in the door and say, "How about a break? I'll take your class to the gym with mine." And it wasn't only me that John took under his wing. His kindness was extended to all the teachers at Knighton. Being next door to John on and off for 8 years, I got to see a lot of John's classroom. John's classroom was a busy classroom. John had a knack of coming up with creative ways of keeping students busy. His class had chessboards, wood carving, computers, electronic gadgets, small appliances, engines, and yes, even TV in his room. John has showed us that there is more to learning than just pen and paper. John's classroom was a safe classroom. John put a lot of time and energy into helping each one of his students learn to accept and to be accepted by his classmates. John would set aside time to help any student with any problem. No matter how big or small, John's ear was always open to students and colleagues alike. John's classroom was an innovative classroom. John's room was one of the first to welcome the computer and all the technology and changes that came with it. When integration became the trend, John was pioneering in that field as well. He met the challenge head-on, as his classroom was a place where everyone could belong. John's classroom was a fun classroom. A year in John's room would mean dance lessons, field trips, campouts at his place, Ukrainian Easter eggs, class parties, and more. John's classroom was a fun classroom. A year in John's room would mean dance lessons, field trips, campouts at his place, Ukrainian Easter eggs, class parties, and more. John's classroom was a giving classroom. If you were a student of John's, you learned the importance of giving to your community. You learned to volunteer as an office helper, a recycler, a kindergarten helper, and a meter reader. Even though John taught me a lot about things to do as a teacher, I did learn not to do a few things from John. For example, I will never make the grade 5 social class sit through all 8 reels of Pierre Berton's National Dream, no matter how relevant it is to the curriculum. Knighton Central is not only going to miss you, John, for your teaching, but for a whole host of other reasons. Where will the students and staff go when someone needs first aid, the bolt cutters, the policy on such and such, the PA system set up, the stage taken down, your computer fixed, to check out the fire alarms, a pair of pliers, the you-know-what that we had for the thingamajig, and the list goes on and on. I know someone will do all those things when you leave, but no one person will do it as thoroughly or as pleasantly as you did. You have always put others before yourself. Your thoughtfulness and kindness will always be remembered. Every one of us can think of numerous times when you brought us a gift, took our supervision, gave us words of encouragement, said thank you for a job done, offered your time to help out, brought us good things to eat, or simply gave a hug. It does sadden me that you're going to retire. Yes, Knighton will lose a lot, but the rest of the community from Knighton to the entire global community will do nothing but gain. You have a tremendous amount of experience, knowledge, and kindness to offer. Now that you are free of the commitment to a job, your work can begin. Whether it is helping to arrange the traveling garage sale here in Knighton or helping someone on a remote spot on this planet, you will always be teaching. Your lessons will always be valuable to someone somewhere. Good luck. Have fun. Take care. Happy retirement, John.